Yeah, thank you. So I'm sorry, I'm a computer scientist. I guess many of you aren't. I do research in lots of different areas to do with digital technology, AI, machine learning, robotics, all those things. And increasingly, I'm looking at the responsible use of technology. So the title corresponds to that, particularly in this context. We can do all these digital things, but should we? So let's go to the next slide. Let's say, this might sound like I'm negative about AI, robotics, use of all those things, but I'm not. They're great. There's lots of useful tools out there. We can put sensors in the field, sensor networks, IoT. We can automate systems, robotic systems everywhere, vehicles everywhere. We can have data analytics. We can collect data from lots of different sources, do lots of analysis. More generally, you can use different bits of AI to explain lots of things, optimize lots of things. And it's getting increasingly easy to deploy these things. So you can deploy your machine learning in a much more easy way than you could a few years ago. And they have obvious benefits. You can improve efficiency, you can cut down hazardous environments for people to be in, etc., etc. There's lots of useful tools. And next slide. I'm conscious I've got too many slides. And everybody says it's great. So there are loads and loads of policy documents. Here are just a few from the UK about what obviously the AI strategy says AI is great, and we need more of that for net zero. Everybody thinks that digital technology is the way to solve net zero. If we want to have more wind and wave energy, we need to automate things. So we need autonomous systems, robotics, things to stop people going out to wind farms, for example, let robots do that instead. And more generally, there's a whole list of things that Innovate UK thinks we need to help with the food production issues. So that's great. There's lots of policy issues. Everybody says it's good. So next slide. Okay, so two issues I'm going to bring to you. One is just briefly, are you sure it works, this thing that you've just deployed? Are you sure it's doing what you want? Because it's nice and easy to deploy these things now. Are you sure the sensor networks, the machine learning, the automated systems, all those things are doing what you want and giving you, they might give you the answers you expect, but are they giving you the right answers? Are they giving you, you mentioned ethics before, are they giving you unbiased answers, for example, of what's actually going on? There are lots of issues, and increasingly with these tools, we need a sort of secondary source of verification to make sure it really is doing the right thing, not just deploy it and then look at what the answers are. Because in a lot of cases, it's not giving you the right answers. And so you need to deploy it and then analyze whether it really is doing that, have a secondary way of checking those things. But my main point is the next slide. Is it really sustainable to deploy these things? So I've just given you a few examples of some of the things I've come across here, and maybe they don't apply to you exactly, but there's a lot of issues related to these things. So first one is, I do a lot of work on things like robotics and autonomous systems, and there's a tendency to put a robot anywhere you possibly can. We've got robots, we've got these things, we're going to put them anywhere. So rather than having a low-tech solution, which would probably do the same thing, let's have a shiny new tool and put it in this place. If you believe in the idea of big data, machine learning, then there's a tendency to collect way too much data and store it in a cloud server somewhere across the world that's heating up the wrong part of the world and using huge amounts of energy, and you take a lot of energy transferring that data across the world. And that's got a huge, these things are obviously unpleasant, and they have more of an impact on sustainability than you think. If you don't know, look about those issues. Similarly, machine learning algorithms, if you use those things for analyzing your data, to make them work, you need lots of data to cut down statistical errors. And so you need to collect a lot of data for those things, and that drives those things. So there's a move, for example, for green AI, which is not using big data, using much smaller amounts of data to actually get the answers you want. Smart cities. It's a tendency to put sensors and tracking and sensor networks everywhere, tags on all mobile vehicles, possibly tags on people as well. The resources involved to actually keep those things going are quite significant. And often then you have to deploy, let's say, a robot to go around and fix all those things. And it's non-trivial to do all those different aspects. And then one at the bottom that's come across a few times is, let's say agri-tech, something like that. You want to put sensors in a field to recognize when the crops aren't growing well or there's some particular disease. And everybody puts sensors in the field, but almost everybody forgets where they are and leaves them in the ground or loses them. And then you have a bit of whatever metal is in that sensor lost. And when something goes wrong, it's quite hard to work out where these things are. In a field, it's bad enough. If it's in the ocean, it's very hard to find them once you've forgotten where they are. So all these issues come to the fore, and what we really have to do is yes, deploy this technology, but be aware there are costs to this. And you need to make sure that you really need to deploy this technology and you understand what the costs are. Excellent. Okay, so that's a summary slide. It's great. These tools do work in lots of situations, but we've got to make sure, number one, that they really, really do work and have separate ways of assessing and ensuring that they really work. And the second one is that we're really clear about the sustainability impact of these things. Just deploying them and saying, look, it's great, it will help me optimize this thing, doesn't, you've got to take into account what the cost is of actually deploying these things and using these things. And there are, this is just a pointer to some of the things we're doing related to international standards on transparency, which is going to help the first one, and sustainability of some of these technology, like sustainable robotics, which is going to help the second. So that's just technology is great, but make sure we're doing it in the right way. That's it.